Hello and welcome to Dialogue. I'm Yang Rui in Beijing. The hard time for the European Union is not over yet. With the economic slowdown, refugee crisis, terrorist attacks, and the rise of nationalism and populism, how should Europe tackle such challenges, and what is the future for the European Union? As for the expansion of the NATO, how will the changing relationship between Russia and the West impact on the European security structure? Will there be a geopolitical disaster? To discuss these and other issues, I'm very happy to be joined here by Dr. Javier Solana, former High Representative for the Common Foreign and Security Policy of the EU and former Secretary General of the NATO. But before we start the interview, let's look at this.
With thousands arrested or dismissed from their posts, the attempt at a fifth military coup in Turkish history has resulted instead in a complete victory for the Erdogan government.
Tankın gücü, halkın gücünü yenememiştir.
But it has also drawn concern about a backlash. What implications will it have for Turkey's relations with NATO? A long-awaited official report into Britain's involvement in the Iraq War has finally been published. Former British Prime Minister Tony Blair offered his sorrow and regret, but not an apology.
For that decision today, I accept full responsibility.
With consequences lasting to this day, what lessons should we learn from the devastating war? By a margin of 52% to 48%, voters in the UK made Brexit a bitter reality. Will the departure of the UK be a sign of disintegration of the European Union? A quarter of a century after the end of the Cold War, NATO countries have decided to send troops to the frontline states of Russia's borders. Does this mean the spirit of the Cold War is alive and well in Eastern Europe?
Welcome to Dialogue, sir. Surprisingly, there was yet another coup attempt in Turkey that has been foiled. What does that mean for NATO?
Well, for NATO, it means that a country that belongs to NATO has had a conflict between the military and the political, the civilian leadership. That in principle should not be damaging for NATO, particularly because this coup has been resolved in hours. But it's no doubt that presents a situation whereby an army of an important country may be divided. Let's see how it evolves. But at this point in time, with the manner in which had been resolved in a short time that has spanned from the beginning to the end, it means that the majority of the armed forces were not behind the coup.
How important is Turkey for NATO?
Well, Turkey is very important for NATO and is very important for the European Union. The stability of Turkey is fundamental for us. Imagine nowadays that war in Syria, and we have all the question of refugees from Syria, that the majority of them come through Turkey. Therefore, the cooperation between Turkey and Syria and Turkey and the European Union is fundamental. So a stable Turkey for us is fundamental.
Given the security dilemma about the Kurds or Kurdistan, quote-unquote, do you share the conviction that the Turkish government has been reluctant in its fight against ISIL?
Well, I don't think that has been related to Turkey, to the Kurds. Turkey has been more committed with the fight against Assad. The relationship between Turkey and the president of Syria, Assad, is very bad. It has been very bad for years. And Turkey has wanted very much that the situation in Syria will be, whenever it's finished, the war, the Assad will not be the president. That is the type of concern that Turkey had, and particularly President Erdogan had in their mind. Of course, the question of the Kurds is not only in Turkey, but in Syria, in other places, in Iran, in Iraq, is for them a big important issue. Because as you see in Iraq, for instance, the Kurds are becoming more or less in a state or semi-state because they have the oil and they have important materials and all that. But for Turkey will be very bad any possibility of a relationship among the Kurds in the three countries with the hope of having a state. That is for Turkey is very, very negative, and they will not allow that to happen.
The next major issue, I'm afraid, is the release of the latest inquiry report by the British government on the Iraq War. Do you believe that Mr. Tony Blair, former British Prime Minister, has genuinely apologized for taking side with the US government in invading Iraq? And do you think the British government then was on the right side of history in our review of the situation?
Well, let me start by saying that I think that the war of Iraq, without a report, I always thought there was a mistake. It was a mistake in the manner it was done. It was a mistake in the manner it was performed the war and performed the peace or the reconstruction of the country. And I think the government of Britain, when was the Prime Minister was Mr. Gordon Brown, they decided to make this inquiry. It was a very courageous decision because...
Was that because of the personal rivalry between Gordon Brown and Tony Blair?
No, they were basically from the same party, and they were working very close together. One was Prime Minister, the other was Minister of Finances. I think it was an idea of the Parliament that was supported by the Prime Minister. And that has been a very long investigation. 7 years it took to get the investigation. And I think it's worth reading the report to see the number of mistakes that were made that never should have been made. And I think we are suffering still for the consequences of that war. If that war would not have taken... For instance, ISIS. I mean, ISIS and Daesh, whatever you want to call it, is a consequence of that war, without any doubt.
Was that one of the major reasons for the British Parliament to make the decision that British troops should not be sent to Syria to be involved in yet another civil strife to add to the political instability there, given the hindsight wisdom about the Iraq War?
Well, I think that troops on the ground of third countries is something that has to be thought for a very, very long time. I don't think it's a good solution. And it was done in Iraq, and it was a mistake, and nobody wanted to repeat it. And therefore it would be very difficult that any country in the European Union will deploy troops on the ground without a real resolution of the United Nations and a real conviction by the international community that this is what has to be done, and never in a unilateral form, never.
Let's look at the unity of the European Union. It's a serious issue following the Leave campaign in Britain. One major catalyst for disintegration, quote unquote, of the European Union, because you cannot deny that the departure of Britain from continental Europe is the early sign of the European disintegration. It threatens to undermine the Schengen Agreement because migration comes across as a major concern for the British electorate.
Let me start by saying that the position of the electorate after the referendum is not a good position for Europe. We would have preferred that that never took place. But let me also say that the United Kingdom has been a very particular member of the European Union. Never had been completely integrated in the European Union. Remember that it entered into the European Union in 1975. They had the first referendum in order to see if they wanted to continue or not when it was a change in government. And
you mean there has been a strong voice of the Eurosceptics in Britain?
Yeah, they've never been really integrated. So I think that whatever happens with the United Kingdom at the end, it will not have repercussions, profound repercussions on other countries that other members of the European Union that may say, well, I am going to leave also, because UK has left and I'm going to leave also. This is not going to happen. The majority of the countries, all of the rest of the countries, they are very happy being part of the European Union, and the one who was more or less happy, you see what has happened, no? The one the Brexit, the referendum won, they know the consequences already. They begin to know immediately the consequences of such a decision. In the world of today, in the 21st century, in a world in which we are all interconnected, to really try to isolate one country is not a very wise decision. It may be a sentimental decision, but not a rational decision.
And do you see the growing momentum of populism on both sides of the Atlantic Ocean? And Brexit, for example, is one of the side effects, a large side effect of such a momentum.
Well, it may be looked at from that angle, which it has some elements of truth. I think that it's a tension in the developed countries between the elites and the people at large. And that has to do with the process of globalization. The process of globalization that we defend, and I defend, I think that has created certain damaging consequences for parts of the Western countries in the middle classes. The middle classes are the ones who are suffering most from the globalization. Other classes, other groupings have benefited very much in other countries. But in this level of middle classes in the European countries and even the United States have created a situation, psychological situation among a certain level of people which are very important for the stability of the country. The middle classes are very important for the stability of countries, in particular for democratic countries. And therefore this can be something that has to be looked over. Because if we continue like that, we may have this populism, which is beginning, they may have an evolution in the wrong direction. And we would not like to have that. Therefore, what we have to do now is to be able to continue handling the globalization, but for not forgetting the people which are damaged by the process of globalization that exists. Many get better, but others get a little bit worse. And that has to be looked and put in place programs to help this type of people.
With the bold decision of Chancellor Angela Merkel to embrace asylum seekers from the Middle East, the political fiber is likely to be torn apart, more or less, to say nothing of the opposition that the old part of Europe is facing from Central and Eastern Europe religiously. Leaders in those countries start to go left, perhaps, despite the rise of far-right movement in many countries. So what do you think of the political disarray?
Well, I think that one thing is refugees, and another thing is migration. Refugees are people that are suffering from a war, and in this case, from a war which is very close to us. And the United
Nations, also legacy of colonialism.
Right. The United Nations has a resolution whereby every single country of the United Nations has the obligation to take refugees when they come and knock at your door. Not only the European Union, China and the United States and Canada have the obligation also to take people from the Middle East if they come to call to your door to say they want to be taken here as refugees. But that refugees do not have to be in your country forever. The war may finish, the reconstruction of the country may take place, and these people may want to go back, or they have the obligation to go back. So a refugee is a very particular type of migrant and has to be taken like that. And on that, I think, on that basis, I think that Chancellor Merkel made that comment. We have to take refugees because they are people who are suffering for a war, which is a unfair war, and we have the first obligation we have is to take them, and the second is to try to help to finish that war. And I hope very much that this war will be finished. The first day of August will be probably the beginning of a negotiation that, let's hope, they will be in the right direction to try to finish that war that has already been for 6 years and is a brutality.
The Brexit vote has contributed to the devaluation of the British pound and the euro and has caused short-term panic in the stock market. But some businessmen have started to look at the advantages of a Brexit in the long run. How do you weigh up the advantages and disadvantages?
Well, it's very difficult to see an advantage. It may be an advantage in a very particular element which will not be very durable. The problem for the United Kingdom to to unlock the lock that they have with the European Union.
But from the British perspective, up to 60, if not 70% of the British legislation is actually in the hands of Brussels.
Right.
And they are not very happy about this.
But that is the same with Spain, the same with France, etc. When the United Kingdom entered into the European Union, they passed a law by saying we are going to do this and this and this and this. They accept it. I don't think that when you want to go to a club, you have to obey the rules of the club, because as your rules, you have been part of drawing, of writing the rules and giving your vote to the rules. So I think that is not a valid argument, really.
There is one strong argument, Javier, that the single currency issue, for example, has seriously eroded the sovereignty of a nation state, and fiscal union is down its way and far from being achieved yet. Political union in particular is so difficult, it's almost a mission impossible. So everything points to the issue of sovereignty of a nation state, and yet the European Union is not ready yet to fully give up this critical idea.
What you have said, which is very difficult, it is very difficult, but it is necessary in the world of today. In the world of several poles, and the way of this interconnection between one and the other, is not logical that the European Union countries try together as possible, together with a single market, together with social policies, together with infrastructure, together with the energy, together with the IT, and together also, if necessary, with the security matters. So this is the obligation of these countries to do. Now, the United Kingdom doesn't want to go that far, but the majority of the countries would like to go further than we are going to now. I mean, the United Kingdom will never be in the euro. They said it very clearly and very loudly. They have the right to do it, but the majority would like at the end to be in the Eurozone also, whenever they comply with the conditions to be in the Eurozone. I think this is, again, if you look at it historically, the European Union is one of the most beautiful, if I may say, constitutional constructs after 1945. Countries that were fighting against each other, civil war, European Union, civil wars in the European Union, which finished up being global wars, 2 in a century. So the fact that freely every country has said never again, and in order to do it, we are going to share sovereignty, share everything, so that we will not fight again amongst each other. I think it's a beautiful consequences that a group of people can take out of the brutality they have to suffer in the 20th century with 2 wars that were not only ours, was also yours.
Thank you very much. You are watching Dialogue with Mr. Javier Solana, former Secretary General of the NATO. We'll be back in a short while. Please stay with us. Welcome back. The Cold War, in theory, came to an end in 1991 following the disintegration of the former Soviet Union. But today, people around the world seem to see an iron curtain descending on 2 fronts at the same time. One is the latest decision by the NATO to deploy troops in the Baltic states on the border of Russia. And many say they feel the coming back of a Cold War spirit. The other front, I'm afraid, is one that stretches from the THAAD deployment in South Korea to South China Sea. Now, in each of the 2 places, we feel the strong military presence of either NATO, which is led by the United States, and of course in South China Sea. It's also a result of the U.S.-Japan Security Pact, which is said to be the cornerstone for the regional security architecture.
I don't think we are going back to the Cold War. The Cold War is over and will be over forever. Remember that the Cold War was fundamentally because there were 2 models, 2 economic models also, not only the end of the Cold War because of the way in which they part the war, but it were 2 fundamental different economic models. today they are not a model which is alternative to the market economy. And therefore, I don't think that any comparison with that situation is valid today. Now, in Europe, the relationship between Russia and the European Union may be not in the best fashion today, but from the relationship of today to the relation in the Cold War is really an immense distance. The same, I think, it can be said here. I think you have suffered a lot in this part of the world after the two wars. It is true that you have not been able to create a structure of security common, and that we did, and we finalized the war in a much deeper manner. That you have finalized the war, that you had not really signed the peace, a full peace between the countries that were fighting in the war. We did that because we had experimented the first war, and we knew who were the responsible, how the responsibility could be deleted, and to construct a European Union in which never again the countries of that part of the world could fight against each other, I think was very good. Now, we don't have the right to export anything that we have done, but we think that we can give some example and give advice if advice is asked, is demanded, how we have handled that part of our history after the Second Great War, that I think has been very successful in a way. You know, the Cold War is over, and countries that were in the Warsaw Pact after the Second World War, they are now in the same compound that are countries that were on the other side. In a way, a beautiful story, and I think that beautiful story has to be maintained and make all the efforts, because it's very interesting and very important for us, Europeans, but also for you, Chinese. Yeah, I think the Chinese will prefer to be living in a world in which they have at least to cooperate with Russia, with the United States, and also with the European Union. And I think that it would be much better to have the European Union, even for China, than not to have it.
The sanctions against Russia are likely to continue until next January due to the remaining instability in Ukraine. However, as the economic interdependency of Russia and the EU is so high, the sanctions also have a negative impact on European economies. So Germany and some other EU countries are inclining to lift the sanctions. I'd like to have your take.
No, it's an agreement to maintain the sanctions at least until the end of the year by everybody. Let's see how things evolve from here to the end of the year, because it's true that well, this is the level of interdependence in the economy of today. You put a sanction, you sanction yourself also. That is the reality. You put sanctions, you have to know that. If you are ready to do that because you think that the action that somebody has taken requires to be punished, well, even if you damage yourself in doing that, you have to do it for moral purposes.
With the end of the Cold War, Europe remains a peaceful continent relatively, despite the Bosnian War. However, in Asia, you don't see much of a sophisticated and regular security mechanism. What other things can be done to find an alternative so that peace can be maintained in the most dynamic region of the world, I mean Asia?
Well, our experience is that to create structures of security was a good idea. Now, you may look into that, how to create a structure of security. The IRF is not quite a structure of security, but at least the IRF is part of this dynamic of talking and getting together and trying to get a conversation, profound conversation on matters pertaining to security on the IRF. You have the Shanghai Cooperation Council. You have some embryon of structures that may, with the time, may develop into much profound relationship on matters pertaining to security. But it's up to you. up to the countries that belong to the region. It's not to be imposed from the outside. No? You are important countries and you have the responsibility to do it. But as I said, IRF is an embryo, maybe an embryo. It's still an intergovernmental gathering. And you have also the Shanghai Cooperation Council, but not every country from the region are part of both. So you have first to see how many you want to have in that structure of security. You have the important part, the important people, the important countries, and but that is your decision. But I think it will be a very good idea to do that. And if that were done, I think that you have to cooperate with us in trying to construct some structures of security also in the Middle East. The Middle East does not have a structure of security, and that is part of the instability, permanent instability in the Middle East. Not only the Israeli-Palestinian issue, but also the relationship between the old empire, Persia, Iran, and Saudi Arabia, which are two countries that have not found the complementarity still. Both want to be the hegemonic power in the region, and with that philosophy you will never find peace in that part of the world, which is so important. So important for you also, because there's countries that produce oil and gas that sell to you or sell to me. So therefore we want to have security there also. So to try to construct the structures of security, I think it's it's a step in the right direction to maintain peace and stability.
Thank you very much for your participation. Thanks a lot.
Great pleasure to be with you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.